So I want to welcome everyone to today's online session. Thank you so much for being here with us. Let me stop sharing my screen actually.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we are so excited for the session that we have today. It's been a while since we've had one of these sessions. We were on break in July, so we weren't able to have any sessions in July. And this is the first that we're having since we have been on holiday. So for those of you guys who may be regulars, we want to thank you again for joining us. Welcome back. And for those of you guys who may not know us or who may not know me, my name is Udo. I am one of the co-founders of Building African Fashion, and my other co-founder, Papa, is also online. I'm not sure if he's able to come on camera. If not, it's okay. We want to just welcome you guys all today for another session. And I see there's already some introductions happening in the chat. Let's keep that going. That's awesome. We always like to know where people are coming from, what they do, so that we can better address your concerns, your thoughts. And also, we love for people to connect with each other. That's one of the reasons that we have these sessions to allow us to network as much as we can, even if we're not in person. So let's keep those introductions going in the chat. So again, we're excited for the session that we have today. In a minute, I'm gonna introduce our speaker and have him come on to share what he has for us today. I'm very excited for this session. It's going to be very interactive, very engaging. And I know that we're all going to take away something significant and insightful from today's presentation and discussion. But by way of introduction, just wanted to just talk a little bit about our organization, Building African Fashion. We are a fairly new organization, just about 5 years old, so we're still a baby organization. We started in 2020. I was actually just telling our speaker, and we started off with the goal really just to be a platform to address areas of bias, try to be a force for inclusion in the African fashion space. And since that time, we've evolved. Our mandate has widened to really to try to be a platform that's helping to grow and drive the greater ecosystem of fashion on the African continent. We do a lot of work like this, which is educational, because we believe that education is so important, can help people really grow their businesses, and it can be a great equalizer, particularly kind of in the area of inclusion that we want to focus on. So we do a lot of work just to kind of spread knowledge and help people get up to speed with the things that they need to grow their businesses. We're also great in terms of collaboration. We want to bring people together across the industry because we believe that we can do more together than we can individually. So we want to be those who are helping to give voice to our work in the industry, to those in the industry, and helping to ensure that our voices as professionals in the fashion industry are being heard and that we're sharing what we need with the right figures, with the right stakeholders to help us grow and further our fashion industry. And then for this particular session, our media equity session is one of the areas that we focus on among a number of others. And for this particular focus area, our aim is really just to see how we can increase the amount of coverage, the amount of press, amount of attention given to the African fashion sector. So we have sessions like this that help those in the industry understand how to tell their stories, to share their stories effectively. And we also have sessions where we allow those in the media sector to connect and to learn about those in the fashion sector so that they can know how to tell our stories and how to bring our stories to the forefront. So that's why we are here today. So I want to now introduce our speaker, um, Mr. Michael Jordan. And I'm sure that's a name that you guys are familiar with, but I'm sure from seeing him on on the screen, you know it's not the same Michael Jordan.
I've already disappointed you, perhaps.
Don't worry, much more to come. It won't be too much longer. So happy to have you, Michael, here with us. I'm going to read your bio, but before I read Michael's bio, just to kind of share a little bit about how Michael and I kind of connected. We've known each other for not too long now, less than a year, but just over the past few months, Michael and I started to kind of run into each other at fashion events, which maybe you wouldn't think that's really up his alley, but yes, run into him at fashion events, events pertaining to the fashion industry, and we just connected and saw the passion that he had for the African space, helping different organizations tell their stories, and we just got to talking, and I thought that the work that he was doing would be so important for our community to help us understand how we can continue to share our stories. And as I was also telling him, even for me and our organization is something that we need to do to understand how to really effectively share our stories and be able to, engage people and help them understand who we are, what we stand for. So that's why we have this session today, and we're so happy to have Michael joining us. So I'm just going to read his bio briefly. I'm sure he can tell us more about himself as he comes on.
Yeah.
I'm going to read his bio briefly just to introduce him. So Michael J. Jordan is the New York-based global communications advisor, executive coach, author of the Global Communications Toolkit, and founder of the MJ Method Communications. Among his specialties today are what he calls fashion sustainability storytelling and advising several African NGOs across the continent. He feels fortunate to have lived on four continents, from Central Europe to Southern Africa to Beijing, China, as a foreign correspondent reporting from 30 countries, visiting professor of international journalism and global communications consultant. This includes the 4 memorable years he spent living high in the mountains of Southern Africa in the Kingdom of Lesotho. Today, he applies his unique background to help his global clientele of organizations and individuals to build their brand, prove their impact, and pitch their products to investors or donors. All of this messaging, all of this messaging and content are aimed to overcome audience skepticism, gain trust, and unlock partnerships. He achieves these objectives for clients via strategic communications, media relations, team training, strategic storytelling, content creation, and executive coaching. And with that, I want to ask Michael to please go ahead and take the floor, take the virtual stage, and share with us what you have today. So over to you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for that, Udochi. I'm so pleased to be here. We've talked about this for a while, and I'm really very pleased to be here for a couple of reasons. First of all, as you mentioned, I feel very fortunate to have lived in Southern Africa for 4 years in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, where I really developed a deep affection for not just the Basotho people, but for so many African organizations and activists on the ground that even today, a significant percentage of my work I devote to Africans themselves, ranging from African nonprofits and activists on the continent to African fashion designers and even diplomats here in New York City. On the other hand, I'm very pleased to have connected with you and with Beth because I understand why African fashion designers and entrepreneurs matter.
Mm,
That all of you listening in, whether you're here actually live or you'll be listening to this recording, I see how important you are as a sector, as an industry on the continent, economically, in terms of job creation, in terms of African soft power, helping to raise awareness and spread the good word about African creativity and products and also in the growing movement towards sustainability that Africans are also heavily involved with African with materials and supplies that sort of as part of the supply chain and production. So all that is to say, I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you today about how what I can do to help ensure your sustainability as a growing company, as a growing brand entrepreneur, to help enable you to survive, thrive, and even lead within your industry, within your country, and across the continents. So let me get started just to show you. Here's the main topic today. Opa. Is that visible? By the way, Udochi? Yes? Okay. So, what's your brand story? How to build your brand and ideally unlock support. Okay. Here, I'm working from here. Today, ideally by the end of the next hour, you'll have a stronger sense. This is just an appetizer. It's just a 1 hour talk and training, okay? A taste for how to tell your story as strategically as possible, how to tell your story in a way that conveys your values, what you and your brand stand for, how to identify your core messages, okay, and how to support that message or several messages with concrete, credible, believable evidence. Okay, we're going to talk today about how to think through who exactly your target audience is and how to touch the heart and mind of your target audience through your communications, through your content on your various social media platforms. Okay, specifically, of course, through your brand story, or what I also call it, your origin story. Okay, so then how to these are pieces of a puzzle. It's part of a formula. How to take your message plus evidence and then weave it into a humanizing story, in this case, about yourself. Okay. Your story of inspiration, for example. And then, lastly, how to present your brand story or origin story on your social media platforms in writing or visually, okay, in terms of photos, videos, that sort of thing, but also when you're asked to speak publicly at events, on stages, and panel discussions, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm a flexible guy, so please, if you have any questions, I guess you can raise your hand according to Zoom or post the questions, and Udochi will hopefully alert me that you have a question. But we'll also allocate time at the end for you to ask questions, of course. Okay, and for me to help brainstorm. Okay, big picture. For those of you listening and those who will watch this, it's important to understand that we are all a brand in our own way. We're all a product. We're all a service in some way. All of us who are working, of course, right? But we are swimming in a sea of brands, okay? Whether we are a company, a nonprofit organization, a government agency, or individual professionals, all of us swimming in a sea of brands, bombarding our target audience. We ourselves know that from the moment we wake up and check our phones throughout the day, we're being bombarded, inundated, flooded by brands that are telling us, what are they telling us? Only how wonderful they are. Okay, because everyone, each of us, me, you, all of us, if asked about our brand, our product, our service, all of us have a self-interest to say that how wonderful we are. Okay, very few of us would say, what kind of professional am I as a global communications specialist? I'm so-so, I'm mediocre. No, who would say that? It's irrational, of course. So in this sea of brands, we all have that self-interest to to say how wonderful we are. But then we also have to recognize, I should jump to this one actually. We should recognize one thing I've learned from being fortunate enough to have lived now on 4 continents, from America to Central Europe to Southern Africa to China, okay? Europe, Africa, Asia. I've learned that in general, there are 2 types of audience in the world, okay? And I want you to fully appreciate because a fundamental aspect of not just communications, but strategic communications is to think through, first of all, who exactly is my target audience, to visualize them, and then to aim our messages and content directly at that audience, at their heart and mind. And as I've learned, there are generally 2 types of audiences. On the left-hand side, you see sheep. Okay, with all due respect to many people, even in our lives, some family members, friends, colleagues, and others, many people in the world on the 4 continents I've lived on, I've seen it for sure, are all too content to follow blindly, unthinkingly. Okay, that if you say my product, this phone, is the best, or the pizzeria across the street has the best pizza in New York City, some of us, unfortunately, will follow blindly, okay? And just accept what we hear, what we're told, what we watch. Then there's the second audience, okay? The critical thinkers. And a critical thinking audience will not just consume what we tell them, okay? They are a more elite audience. They will demand, they'll hear our words and they will demand evidence to prove that if we say that we are the best, they'll say, oh, really? Prove it to me. Okay, I'm not just going to buy your product or donate or invest, whatever it is. I'm not going to do something to support you unless you can prove to me that you truly are as good as you claim to be. This is all very important because when we talk about your brand story, your origin story, I don't want to just hear wonderful words about your story of inspiration. I advocate for say whatever you want, but support it with concrete, meaning specific, credible, meaning believable, evidence, even verifiable that can be proven and that you present transparently. Okay, because we are aiming for the critical thinking audience, because the first audience, especially those of you who are fashion designers and entrepreneurs, the first audience is unsustainable for you and your business. You can fool someone once, maybe. Can you fool them a second time, a third time? It's an unsustainable approach. With the second audience, if you can prove that your brand, your product, your service is truly as good as you claim it to be, then they will return second, third time. They will help spread the word to others. Hey, try this person, try this brand. Okay, so we aim for the second audience, smart but skeptical, the skeptical audience. Okay, so then going back to why communication, strategic communications matter. Okay, because in the world today, as you know, there are many liars, scammers. There's so much misinformation, disinformation out there that it's important that if we want to reach that smart but skeptical audience, that we have to work hard intellectually to prove, again, first of all, that we are who we say we are, because again, there's so many scammers out there. Anyone could create a website, right, and steal photos online. The building African fashion, anyone could come up with a meaningful name like that and slap some photos up there that they steal, right? So we all need to prove we are who we say we are, that we're doing what we say we're doing, and that we are as good as we claim to be. Okay, this is also about media literacy. Okay, that we recognize that that there are efforts to trick us, to fool us every day. So now we're turning this around where we are the content creators. So we need to work hard, intellectually speaking, in terms of the content we create and publish. Okay, when we're aiming for this more elite target audience. Okay, back to so we talked already about who's our target audience. I came up with a definition for what is strategic storytelling. Okay. And we will, just to let you know, for those of you who may be feverishly taking notes, okay, or snapping screenshots, we are recording this, and both Udochi and I will be publishing the entire video so you can rewatch as many times as you like. Okay, especially if you're suffering from insomnia. Anyway, my own definition of what is strategic storytelling. It's not just any storytelling, but storytelling for a purpose, okay? Especially when our intent is to achieve a strategic objective, okay? Especially when we or our organization are under pressure to prove something persuasively. Let's say our results, our impact, or that, oh, I'm sorry. It's very sensitive. Wait. Yes, or that your brand is as good as you say it is, especially for those of you who say, my brand, our brand is sustainable. How can you prove that? We are a conscious fashion brand. We are ethical. We are eco-friendly. How can you prove that to our target audience, the smart but skeptical critical thinkers? And then, as I say in the last line here, a key component to overcome our audience's skepticism is, and I'll say it again and again, as people who know me know about me, that concrete, credible, verifiable can be proven, evidence that then we present transparently. Because a confident brand knows that, hey, I've got the proof, I've got the evidence, and I'm not going to hide it. Okay. An unconfident product or brand or professional may be dodgier about their willingness to prove, to show their evidence. Okay. We need to zoom ahead here. Why brand stories matter. Okay. Some people will think, hey, I'm building up my company, building up my organization, my brand, my product, my service. Okay. What kind of content do I need? Maybe the bare essentials. Michael, why do we need brand stories? Okay. Well, I've studied this issue quite a bit. And I've also turned to our friend ChatGPT. But among the five most important reasons why you yourself should start to create your own brand story, your own origin story, is fashion is less about fabric and the product, but then your identity. We'll talk a little bit more about this a bit later. Stories can create an emotional connection, a loyalty. Okay. Third, your story can help separate you in that crowded marketplace, in the sea of brands. That's how you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace, your comparative advantage, your value added. Okay. Storytelling can also elevate your product's perceived value. And lastly, as we all see, social media thrives on stories. Okay. You see how popular some of these 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute stories are. Okay. As people swipe continuously through the videos. Okay. I even mentioned just a quick example that here in New York City, a Cameroonian friend and fashion designer who's also become a client of mine. She tells me often about how once she began sharing more about her journey from Cameroon to New York and step by step building up her fashion brand, she saw how her sales jumped. Okay, this is important because some of you may feel shy, a little introverted. Okay, like I don't want to be out there and sharing some of my heartache, some of my disappointments and failures, that sort of thing. But for you to know there's also some positive feedback for that, some rewards for that, because then many in your audience may identify with you, can relate to you, may appreciate, may learn about the story behind the story behind your brand. Okay, now zipping through, I want to get to more of the core skills and strategies. Okay. And I'll also share a couple case studies with you as well. Okay. To apply these skills and strategies. Just very briefly about my background. Okay. Because I'm not just here today to talk at you, to lecture at you, do this, do that. Okay. But also, even in terms of my own credibility, how I learned some of these things. I myself, as I said, or as Udochi explained, was a foreign correspondent for reporting from 30 countries, mostly in Central and Eastern Europe, also in Central Asia, then in Southern Africa, starting off in Hungary, my father's hometown, Budapest. Okay, here's my first story, blah, blah, blah. Moving on. Then I lived in Lesotho. Lesotho, I don't know, I can imagine very few have actually been to Lesotho. It is one of the most remote countries in all of Africa. I was fortunate enough to live there for 4 years with my family there, including my children. And while there, I was very moved by the HIV and malnutrition crisis there. So it was there that then I branched out from my career as a journalist and then as a visiting professor of international journalism. I branched out into global communication, specifically health and HIV communications. Okay. And one of my gigs, one of my assignments there, one of my most memorable assignments was how I learned to produce impact stories. I'll talk to you about this as well, but this is also related to strategic storytelling because this assignment was for a major international nonprofit focusing on HIV orphans and their caregivers. Okay. So they wanted more money from their donors, but they had to prove to their smart but skeptical, critical thinking target audience of donors, they had to prove that in 5 years they'd made significant impact. Okay. So then I developed my own methodology for how to produce impact stories, what I call the fork in the road. And it was in Lesotho. That's one reason why I grew so fond of Lesotho and the Basotho people was my just to be able to roll up my sleeves and work side by side with the Basotho and with Basotho colleagues and writing about their real life challenges. Okay. Now, I want to share, well, some of my most important lessons learned. Okay. This is a fundamental principle of journalism, but I believe of life itself. Okay. Show me, don't just tell me, we say. Okay. Again, it goes back to what I said a few moments ago, which is say whatever you want, tell your audience anything you want, but prove that you mean what you say. Show them with concrete evidence or even real life stories as a form of evidence, talking about the people who actually have benefited from your brand, your products, your services, okay, your clothes, your fashion design, to really bring to life the real people who somehow benefit or whose lives you somehow positively impacted, made a difference in their lives. Okay, credible evidence. One thing I want to share with you here is my 4-step formula for strategic communications. Okay, I call it the who, what, why, how. And this is also related, also relevant to your brand story, your origin story. Okay. Whenever I communicate, let's say even with this event today, this training, I was thinking through who, who exactly would be my target audience and why exactly are they my target audience? What would you be looking for and why? How could you benefit from this training and why? Okay, I'm trying to visualize as clearly as possible. What might you know and why? What might you not know and why? So, how can I deliver my words, my messages, my skills and strategies in a way to make it accessible enough for you to appreciate and even implement, to apply? Second, okay, now that I can visualize my target audience, see you as clearly as possible, what exactly do I want to write? What exactly do I want to say? What point, what argument, what idea, what message, or in this case, what story do I want to tell? Okay, as a starting point. Third step, most important, most challenging. It's one thing to say, oh, I want to write about this, I want to say that. But why exactly? Why exactly do you want to deliver this message or that point, that argument? Why exactly tell that story? And what I'm always listening for is the because word. Okay. I want to share this story, this impact story about this client, this beneficiary. Why, comma, because what they will help bring to life the work that I do, the impact that our brand has on our customers, our clients, and others. I came up with a filter, as you see. My audience, target audience, whoever's consuming your content on your social media platforms, you're visualizing them. How can they benefit? Why should they care? Let's think about empathetically. With empathy, imagine yourself in their shoes. My audience should find this content interesting or persuasive or even valuable. Why? Because finish that sentence. Okay? That's a very challenging exercise to think through how and why they might benefit. And then the fourth step, how exactly do you want to deliver this message? How exactly do you want to tell your story or make your point or argument? With what facts, details, evidence, what anecdotes, vignettes, stories, what photos, videos, that sort of thing. So who, what, why, how, and how. Okay. One more thing before I get to brand stories specifically, the core message. Okay. This is very important in all forms of communication because, as you know, our audience has less and less attention, shorter and shorter attention spans. So we have to be very clear within the first 1, 2, 3 sentences, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. If they're going to be reading your brand story or origin story on their phone, on their laptop, we got to be quick in terms of delivering what exactly is the core message. Why should they read this? How can they benefit? Okay. And the way I do this, it's a very challenging intellectual exercise, how to mold, how to craft your core message. The way I do this, I do it actually backward. I imagine if they're going to read this story, take the time to watch this video, consume this content. What's the one thing I hope they're going to remember? What's the one thing they must learn about me, my brand, my product, my service? They can't walk away without learning this about me? Or maybe one day later, one week later, what do I hope they will remember from watching this video or reading this story? Okay. The one thing is XYZ, comma, because. So we're justifying. So then if that is the core message they must consume about us, then embrace that from the beginning. Apply that from the beginning. Okay. Block out all the other noise. Okay. I know I have a disorganized mind, so many important things to talk about, but we need to boil it down to one, two, three core messages that we hope they'll remember. And then if we make the argument that that's what we want them to remember, then embrace that from the beginning. Make that the spine or the thread through our content, so they walk away with that. Okay, so why empathy, EQ matters. So let's get to a couple examples. Okay, first of all, any questions? By the way, I can't see the questions here. Udochi, how are we doing? Any questions?
No questions in the chat.
Okay, good. Moving right along. Now, today we're focusing on the brand story, the origin story, okay? But maybe this also plants the seed for future events with BAF and with this membership, okay? For content creation workshops, because I've actually identified 6 different forms of strategic content for you and your platforms, okay? Essential proof is to prove again that you are who you say you are, doing what you do, that you are as good as you claim to be. The origin story, which we'll focus on today, can can document your backstory, your story of inspiration, as you see here, where your story begins, your journey begins, how it evolved up through today. And through this, you can express your inspiration, your passion, values, dedication, competence, commitment, and so many other values. Okay. Impact stories, we won't talk about this today, but the need, as I said, evidence driven proof that you truly have delivered results and impact. Partner stories, if trust is an issue for those of you who then are seeking investors or donors, and you need to lower that wall of suspicion or skepticism, build a bridge of trust, reduce the risk for investors to invest in you or donors to donate to you, then it can be very valuable to show how you built up trust with other partners. Okay? That this isn't your first rodeo, as we say. You've earned trust from others, so share those stories of your trust building background with partner stories. The fifth one, I call it how the sausage is made. For example, if you're claiming to produce a sustainable or environment, eco-friendly, conscious fashion product or brand, you can show step by step how exactly you created your product, something of the supply chain. Again, form of evidence to prove you mean what you say, okay? That you are telling the truth. So you don't just say, here's the sausage, here's the brand, right? You're going to show step by step, okay? Lastly, even your thought leadership, okay? I would love to hear from some of you in the future. Maybe you're more established in your career where you have things to say about African fashion and the industry and various challenges that you face. So how to express your thoughts, ideas, opinions, analysis, insights, and all that. Why? Because that will also help elevate your brand. Okay, that you've got a voice. All right, people will start to recognize your brand because of you. You become the face of your brand. Okay. We'll talk about this another time. Your elevator pitch, okay? That's another important aspect, which is if someone says you meet someone at some event and they say, tell me about yourself, how to very quickly, efficiently introduce yourself, your brand, your company, your product, your idea, whatever it is, your service, okay? But now we get to the brand story, okay? And there's so much research online. I encourage you all to do your own research. Why does a brand story matter? Okay. And there's a lot has been written about the role of storytelling to touch the heart and mind of consumers, clients, investors, donors, whomever the target audience is. Okay. I know this is small. Okay. but I like some of the key points. Again, in today's competitive landscape, this is from a website called Retail Next. Okay. Having a strong brand story is no longer just an option, it's a necessity. Oh, I liked, oh, no, 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 there was a better line there. Oh, maybe I lost that slide. Okay. Yes, I also turned to ChatGPT, okay, where I asked ChatGPT very politely, please show me evidence. I'm an evidence-driven kind of guy. Please show me evidence that brand stories can boost a company's bottom line, okay? As you see here, consumer preference and trust, neuroscience and emotional impact of storytelling. Okay, that's one thing that unites all of us around the world, historically, as cultures, as people, as humanity, of oral storytelling passed down from grandparents to children to grandchildren, that sort of thing. Okay, it touches the heart and mind. Content marketing return on investment. Okay, brand value growth, many, many reasons. Okay, I turned to Harvard Business School for this is interesting too. What is a brand story? What's the importance? Five compelling examples. They've identified several different forms of brands stories. Okay. Functional brand story, the underdog. Okay. Like a good comeback story. This is the important thing to know with these stories that Harvard Business School is talking about. This is where companies like yours or organizations like yours are putting your customer or client at the heart of the story, of the hero's journey. Okay. What I'm talking about today is something a little different where it's about you and your story. Okay. But the underdog brand story, lifestyle brand story, oh, the celebrity brand story, and even the social mission brand story for those of you who actually are trying to deliver social impact. Okay. Now, case study. Oh, and we happen to have Brita Cabanos on the call. I want to share with you one of my clients' origin stories. Okay, where let me allow in someone who's popped up. Okay, I met Brita a year ago. She's the founder of Inside Fashion Design, a Portland, Oregon, in the U.S. based company, as well as she founded the Conscious Fashion Design Academy. Okay. And I feel very fortunate to have met Brita, but also we've become partners as well. Where for Brita, you see, this was a training that I organized for the Conscious Fashion Design Academy in fashion sustainability storytelling, where I talked about the six different types of content for Brita. I've also co-created with Brita this Prove Your Impact a Content Creation workshop, an online course. Okay. But now, then I worked with Brita specifically on her founder story. Okay. And this is what I want to share with you, which is with Brita, that first we talked about what is your core message? Okay, this isn't just story time where we say, let me tell my readers, my audience, the entire story of how I got into fashion. Okay, that's a different kind of inspirational story. In this case, our our main objective was to help promote Inside Fashion Design and the Conscious Fashion Design Academy. Okay. So in talking with her, and I want you all to think through too, we talked about what are your core messages? Why exactly, what do you want to say? Why exactly do you want to say that? And then how do you want to say it? Okay. But also thinking empathetically. Why should readers care? Okay. Why should a target audience care about how and why you founded this organization? Okay. Then we identified, Brita can speak for herself, but I want to get to the crowd here too to hear more feedback. Okay. But I have a link here as well to her story to read as an example. And Brita told me this story that then we fashioned into her own brand story slash origin story. Okay. That when she herself was in fashion, starting out in fashion in her 20s, being worked hard, used and abused by her employer, feeling very much alone. At some point in her story, she decided, one day I didn't have support. I felt very much alone. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have someone I could turn to. And then at some point, she realized one day I would like to create an organization. I'm summarizing, Brita, forgive that, right? One day I would like to create that kind of organization that can be a gathering place for young creatives, okay, for those in the fashion design and entrepreneurship sphere, okay, so they don't feel alone. They can feel a sense of community, support, resources, mentorship. And so that was part of her overall core message. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is why I care. This is why I'm so impassioned. Okay. And guess what? We didn't open the story that way. If you were to read this, okay, her opening sentence, I know this is quite small, but her opening sentence was, you can feel very alone in this industry, especially when you're trying to create something meaningful. I know because I've been there. Okay. And then she explains. Okay. So, as I call it, it's a curtain raiser, as if you are the director of a film. You have an audience sitting in the movie theater, the lights have gone down. People are now chewing on their popcorn. Okay. And right away, when you go to a movie theater, or watch a movie, the film director immediately wants to grab your attention, to pull you into the story. Okay. So Brita quite effectively pulls us in by saying, here's what it was like. She paints a picture with her words of here's what it was like when I was breaking in. Okay. She opens small with that story. Okay. Then once she pulls you in with some of the drama of her origin story. Then she opens it up and explains, so that's why I founded this organization. Okay? She herself is has become the face of the brand. She's sharing her values as to why she did this and that, okay? Why she cares, why she's so committed to this. And as you see, if you were to read this, then it really emphasizes how her personal story represents, symbolizes, opens a window onto the organization itself. Okay, that's what I would want each of you to do as well. It's not just me telling your story. Okay, it's again, it's I want to tell my story for a purpose. Okay, and the purpose is to show how exactly I came to care about my sustainable brand or about raising African pride in their own traditions of knitting, crocheting, or of using sustainable natural materials, why you care. Okay, or of supporting marginalized women and children in your communities, in your country. Okay, you're sharing why you care. Even within this story, and I'll show you a little bit more about how she constructed it. I even said, hey, Britta, who planted the seed for some of these values for why you cared? And she said, well, my father, my mother, blah, blah, blah. So then once we lay out the main arguments, okay, then we even go farther back into history, which you see here a photo of Britta and her father, who was very eco-friendly and encouraging his daughter to also be environmentally friendly. And that's part of her story, okay? So here's one more example. And this is a woman I haven't met yet, but I will soon. Okay, this is an Australian fashion designer. And this is also really a very unique but brilliant approach to a brand story by sharing your origin story. Okay. This is Jude Kingston, as I said, an Australian fashion designer who shares her story. She founded this nonprofit, as you see here, raising awareness of mental health in the fashion and creative industries. Her origin story is that she herself, in her 20s, fashion designer, working hard, used, abused, treated poorly, so poorly that she's told the story publicly, okay, very often, that she even considered suicide. That she then, once she left the industry, she needed 2 years to recover emotionally, okay? And as part of her recovery, she founded this nonprofit, right? So then in her about section, and this is where I want you to visualize in text form, but also even oral form, that when you're on stages and asked to speak, okay? And I hope to meet Jude next month at New York Fashion Week, where she will get up and share this story as a way to introduce her nonprofit, her story of inspiration. Okay. This is what she's done, but it's a very clever way. And I'm curious to ask her whether she was aware of how she turned her own trauma, and many of us have some trauma from the past, okay, that then inspired something to do something about it, okay, to overcome that, to make a difference, to turn a negative into a positive in your life, okay? Even one more quick example. Also on the call, we have Siamanda Chega from Kenya. And in talking to her, working with her, I know that her story as a social entrepreneur with her own workshop in provincial Kenya in Nakuru, working with marginalized women to create children's clothing and others, that part of her origin story was when she, after living in New York for many years, returning home with her newborn daughter and seeing what hardship many of her fellow Kenyans were living, women and children were experiencing, whether it be HIV, whether it be poverty, so she felt so inspired that she came back to New York and wanted to do something about it. So she founded her own social enterprise. Okay. So getting back to the skills for you to understand that I have this slide here with how to tell your origin story. Okay. Your origin story is not, I was born on a cold, rainy night in the village of, in the town of. No, no, that's your whole biography. Okay. Your origin story is first to identify where exactly this story, this relevant story, the story of your brand, your product, your service, where exactly that begins and why. You see at the beginning of this timeline. Okay, this is my strategic approach to creating a story. Okay, a strategic story. Where does this story begin and why there? Why exactly there? Then you have turning points. Then this happened, key moments in your story. You don't need to tell your whole story, but key moments, okay, along that journey that were significant for some reason. So then, as you see below, the evolution. How does your story change or evolve over time? And more importantly, not just then I did this, then I did that, but for you to also explain, then we did this, comma, because, then we did that, comma, because, to explain part of your journey leading up to the present where you are today and even moving forward with here's where we're going from here into the future, your brand, your product, your service. Okay. One more thing before I get to one more example. This is a key difference in terms of the storytelling structure, what I call the diamond storytelling structure. Okay. There's a difference between a simple feature, just, hey, tell a story about myself, okay? Or about one of my clients, one of our customers, right? Versus what I call a big picture feature, where you open small, but then you open up to that core message, to the big picture, connecting the dots to your overall brand, your brand itself, your values, what that mini story symbolizes about your bigger picture. Okay. And I even laid out how exactly to create one of these, a curtain raiser. As I said, Brita, for example, the curtain goes up and we see her there in her 20s, right? And then some deep, meaningful insights. So that's why I did XYZ, connect the dots, opening up to, and here's why our brand is committed to XYZ. Okay. And then once you lay that out, then we can transition to the past, the deep past, who exactly planted the seed in your mind, how exactly your story was born. Okay. Your story of inspiration. The reason why we open this way, just to clarify, the reason why we open this way is because of the short attention spans, okay, of our readers, of our audience. You open in a compelling way to pull them in. Then you got to make clear soon enough within the first few paragraphs, here's why that story matters. Here's what the real core message is. And then once you've hooked them, if they like what they read, if your audience likes what they read, hey, stay a while. Okay. And then you can get into the deeper past and more recent past of your journey. Okay. Now, one more case study before we open this up. And this is where the spotlight, I'm going to cast the spotlight on Udochi, okay? Building African Fashion, the nonprofit, right? The host of today's events. This is their website, a meaningful mission. BAF is dedicated to creating coalitions to build Africa's fashion sector, okay? Then I clicked on the about, okay? 2020 was an unprecedented year, talking about COVID-19, but also the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement. And then you see that line. It was the desire to ensure that Africa is not left out of the global reckoning that led to the birth of building African fashion. Now, we don't see anything about Udochi and her origin story, okay? But let me ask you, I can stop the share right now, okay? First of all, what would you want them? I know it's very tempting to start from the top of a story. Okay, like, how do I want to open my story? First sentence, first paragraph. Okay, I feel inspired. But I always start my story with the big picture first, the core message first. Okay. Udochi, let me ask you, what's one what's the core message of BAF? What's one thing that people must learn about BAF and the mission that you serve today?
So I think the main mission, and Papa's here as well, my co-founder, so he can definitely chime in as well. I think the one core message I would want people to take away would be that we are looking to build and help grow the African fashion industry.
Why? All right. Let me just walk in. That's a good start. That's a good start. But why should they know this? Why should they care about this?
Why should they care?
Yeah.
Uh, because I think historically, Africa generally, and particularly creative industries, have been kind of looked down upon, have not been given the room to grow and thrive. And there's so much talent on the continent, and it's coming to the fore more now. But there's still work that needs to be done to ensure that we have what we need, the systems that we need, the resources that we need to fully take advantage of the talent on the continent.
Good. I see that Papa has also weighed in with to circulate opportunities across the board as much as possible, right? That's a good start. Okay. But I also want so bias, for example, I know you mentioned bias as well, but I also want to, I believe, just going back to the slide, okay? I think there's also an important argument to be made, and I checked with our friend ChatGPT. Simple question of how important is the fashion industry in Africa? Simply, why does the African fashion industry matter? Okay, I'm not saying rely on ChatGPT, but of course it's a good starting point, right? Economic contribution, cultural identity and soft power, youth and entrepreneurship, industry, local industry development, and then it lists the challenges, right? So big picture, I think part of your big picture should also be, hey, this isn't just because, oh, we feel like it's an important issue to spotlight, let's say bias, right? But actually, African fashion matters because to make a strong, even lawyerly argument to the audience, as if the judge and jury, here's why you should support us, here's why you should join us. African fashion matters, which means that on the ground, African fashion designers and entrepreneurs matter. Okay? As individuals and starting up their own enterprises and brands, they matter, but they are part of a bigger, more meaningful picture for the continent itself, for their own countries and communities,
Yeah,
right? Economic development, but also helping maybe to lift people out of poverty, help break the cycle of poverty, empowering women and others, right? There are many big picture reasons for
yeah,
why, hey, you should care about the work that we're doing. Okay. I know you're working with models. So if you were to say, because exploitation let's say, I'm not an expert on the topic, right? Exploitation is an issue. Evidence. This is what I mean by when I say concrete, credible evidence. Udochi, even to insert with a hyperlink to, if you were to say, for example, African fashion is a growing part of economic growth across the African continent, then I would want to see a hyperlink there that then I click on it. It's like, don't take Udochi's word for it. Don't take the BAF word for it. This is according to the World Bank, let's say. Okay, you find some serious, credible evidence to support that. Okay, so now you have a real airtight, even lawyerly argument for why the industry matters. Therefore, what we're doing on behalf of the industry and the players in the industry matters as well. Now you're making a stronger argument. Okay, that's why we offer this, that, and the other kinds of services, right? Similar to Brita's approach with her origin story. But now, what I want to see, I want you to humanize, to touch the heart and mind. With the evidence, you touch the mind of your skeptical audience. With the humanizing, you touch the hearts. So Udochi and Papa's on the call as well, the co-founders. Describe for me that moment when the light bulb went off, whether it was you individually or both of you said, aha, your aha moments. Aha, there's a need. Someone needs to do something. I should do this. I'm ready to step up and do something about this. What was that moment that inspired you?
So I think it may be different for me and different for Papa as well. And I think as you kind of alluded to a little bit, which we didn't talk about too much on the website, we initially actually started up as an organization called Bias in African Fashion. That was in 2020 when we were looking to make sure that within the continent itself, we were having the right conversations around inclusion, not just focused on racial equity because that wasn't so much the issue, but other areas in which where there was bias. So at that point, what kind of prompted it for me initially was seeing a post that Papa put on Instagram where he talked about that there was a need to kind of address and talk about these issues of bias, prejudice within the fashion space. Um,
Predators, you said.
Prejudice, I
Oh,
said,
prejudice. Uh-huh.
yes,
Yes.
within the African fashion space and make it a bit more relevant
Uh-huh.
to what was happening within the continent. So that's when I actually reached out to him and asked, suggested that he write an article to kind of flesh out his idea a bit more. And then I think after we wrote the article, it was further prompting from those that read those articles that they wanted us to have more conversations that led us to initially start the first iteration of what we have now, which was bias in African fashion. Um,
So, so this is a great start. Okay. And I want those of you listening in to appreciate, right? I'm already visualizing one potential way to open up. The curtain goes up, and there's a three-step process to how to open very effectively. First of all, immediately humanizing. We want to see someone immediately from the first sentence. Okay. The curtain goes, and so we want to see someone right away to humanize the story. Second, we want to see that person doing something.
mhm,
Okay. Meaning some movement, some drama, some action. This is a story, right? Third, whatever they're doing, whatever we show them doing, should be relevant, connected to the big picture. Okay, not just any activity.
yeah,
So in this situation, just imagine, and I've never heard this story from Udochi before. Okay, this is off the top of my head here. The curtain goes up. We see Udochi in 2019, right?
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay. In the wake of, let's say, so there I was in 2020. When was it
No,
George Floyd?
was May. So we started like in June of
Okay.
20.
So there I was, May, right? In the spring 2020, flipping through social media, watching videos, and so upset by what I was seeing and learning about the George Floyd incident, right? Wanting to do something. Then I read online this Nigerian artist and creator, designer, excuse me, Papa, right? Wrote a piece about XYZ. I reached out, said, you should elaborate on this, write more. And that was the genesis about initially about bias, but then that opened a door for me. Then I dove in, I immersed myself in African fashion. And that's when I began to realize how meaningful this was, how important this was, ranging from XYZ, what it does economically, to what it does culturally, soft power, like to show the range of why African fashion matters. So you can
Mhm.
start small with that
Mhm.
moment of inspiration, okay? But that was the hook for you diving into something much more meaningful, okay?
Exactly.
You see what I mean?
Yes, yes,
That could be
definitely.
one way to do it,
Mhm.
okay? Now I know any questions about that, by the way, Udochi?
No, I think it makes sense. I like that approach. I
Okay.
wonder how it would be different though for Papa from his point of view, kind of what
Ah,
the, and also
okay,
like if we're
good.
sharing a story like on our website, how do we tell two different point of views? How do we bring the two point of views together to kind of share?
Well, thank you, Piers, also for his own website, for your own social media platforms. Thank you for volunteering, Papa, because I know we're running a little late, but I'd love to hear another example. Papa, are you still there?
Yes, I am actually. Hi.
Great. Hi, hi. So I'm curious, what's your origin story? What's your brand story? What was your inspiration, let's say, for co-founding this organization?
I think for me, it falls right into the kind of projects that I have been doing in my career, and which are mostly legacy projects, and trying to not look out for not just on me, but all the people who we live together, who not live in terms of like oh staying together, but like fellow travelers of this lifetime and the life to come. I try as much as possible in my project to document and put humanity first in everything I do. So, but most importantly, documenting the process for whoever that would have it in the future to have. I think so. When Udochi reached out to me, it was a no-brainer because it was right up the kind of project, the kind of things I like to do, anyways.
That's very interesting. And what was the inspiration that what inspired you to pursue this as a career? What was, let's say, the turning point or the aha moment where it's like, you know what, this is what I'm going to commit myself to the rest of my life, let's say, or at least for this period of your life.
I think for me it was how I started. I started with no sign of where to get information from. There was no one to guide, no one to show me. So I literally had to like do all the diggings in my career. And so as I was doing the diggings, I was documenting it, and I didn't want to keep that secret. I wanted other people to also benefit from it so that they don't have to do the diggings. They don't have to go through the amount of stress or the process I went through, and they can have it easier. So I feel that was like why it was like, okay, fine. This is what I've signed up for anyways, to ensure that people don't have to go through the kind of stress I went through because I went through it already.
See,
And I also, can I
yeah,
say something? Sorry, just I don't
please.
mean to interject, but I was gonna say for Papa, I hadn't heard him actually share this from this perspective, that BAF is kind of a continuation of work that he's already kind of doing, which is very true. I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective because he has other organizations that he has that kind of support other areas of the fashion space on the continent. So yeah, this is very interesting that I'm able to kind of hear from his perspective as to kind of why this is important for him.
I appreciate that we're sharing these things because I want the audience to also recognize there is a formula that's emerging here. Okay. I'm not saying that every story should be similar, but you see that everyone does have a certain moment of inspiration and then a desire to share with others, right? And so just listening to Papa, I could imagine at least two approaches, let's say, to opening your story. I mean, we haven't even gotten into who was it, let's say, who planted a seed in you to become an artist, to become a designer, to care about these things so much, right? So it could open with the curtain goes up. And was it a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, who was it who even planted that seed of a desire to become to be creative?
For me, I've actually told a story, and I think a couple of seasons down the line, where it's my aunt, and she's late now, and I did like an old tribute body of work, celebrating her memories and how even though our methods were kind of harsh, but it was part of the story, anyways.
So even if it were, so obviously there are two possibilities, right? For your own brand or your own work, and then for BAF, right? So there's a possibility that that you open small with the very origins of the when the seed was planted, when the light bulb went off, that this is what you wanted to devote yourself to. And then you could connect the dots all these years later, being a part of BAF is a continuation of that to explain that it's a logical continuation, right? Or as Udochi mentioned, it could be something more contemporary, 2020, right? So there I was in the spring of 2020, seeing this, experiencing that, feeling this and that, right? And a desire to want to do something. But then explaining this was a continuation of, to me, I saw it as a continuation or a logical extension of what I've been doing for a number of years already. What do you think?
I agree.
I'd be happy to work with you guys in the future on that. Udochi, should we, are there any, I guess we should wrap up soon, but are there any questions from the audience as well?
No questions. No questions in the chat. But we
I
can
know we,
definitely
yeah,
open up
go ahead.
questions now if anybody has any questions that they want to ask based on what
Feel
you've learned.
free, please. I know I ran long with my own storytelling and the sharing of skills and strategies. But I do want you all to know, Udochi and I have talked about the likelihood that this could be a stepping stone. Just to share some of these skills and strategies is quite abstract. Okay. But some of you then may want to create your own brand story, your own origin story. So we're also talking about then organizing a content creation workshop. Okay, as I mentioned, there are the 6 pieces of content creation I've identified for fashion designers and entrepreneurs. And so if you're interested, please reach out, let me know, let Udochi know, that then we can organize some sort of specifically, whether it's a content creation event or even a workshop, multi-session, where I lead you step by step through how to produce through the core message, your origin story, and then how to assemble all the pieces of the puzzle. Okay?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely this is worth a follow-up. Okay, there's actually one question in the chat, but I was going to say this is worth a follow-up.
Yes.
There's a lot that you can delve further, even just based on what you've presented. And I think for each person, it may be worth it to just take some time and sit with you and see how you can help them to really hone in and identify what their stories
Yes.
are, and even like
Absolutely.
how to tell them based on what platform that they may be on, how to kind of engage people based on if they're
Yes.
on social media, if it's their website, or if they're having like speaking engagements.
Definitely. And how to present as a speech too, as a talk.
Exactly.
Collins, I like your question here. My question is, if an entrepreneur doesn't have capital, i.e. money, to
Mhm.
create this visual proof on social media for the skeptical audience, is there any other route to go about? Well, a couple things I would say. First of all, as an entrepreneur, as you know, there are a lot of startup costs out of our own pocket. Okay. What I'm suggesting today only requires time and efforts, something that you can create from your own home in your pajamas. Okay. And so that origin story to structure it, that's one thing. If you're talking about the 6 pieces of content, one thing I would do, I don't know where you're located, Collins, but you know what? I also like to work with young people, not just as a teacher and trainer, but it could be possible that you could recruit some smart young student communication student, journalism student who would, to create a win-win. If you can't afford to pay them, okay, you can at least offer them an opportunity to get their content published, to build up their own portfolio. Okay, so you make clear, hey, I can't afford to pay you, but if you write this story or do this, do that, okay, you can then put it on your own LinkedIn platform, your own portfolio to then showcase what you're capable of doing. No future employer needs to know that you did it for free. Young people just want an opportunity to be published, right? And so there's that option. And in addition to building up their chance of just being published, you could also give them a nice recommendation, a job recommendation, okay, as a way to compensate them. So yes, turn to cheap labor. Okay, smart young students looking for an opportunity to be published somehow.
But I also, can I ask a
Yeah,
question? I wonder
please.
why Collins thinks that you need capital to provide visual proof. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. I don't know if you're able to speak, Colin. So I think if it's to create social media content, like you said, it doesn't cost too much. But just wanted to understand why, what he thinks the capital would be for in terms of. Um,
Yeah, are you referring to, hey, I need to hire a comms team, a content creation team, or social media team? Is that what you mean? Yes, says the man. Yes. I totally understand. I totally understand. I mean, although I'm pretty well established in my career, I'm also building up my YouTube channel with videos, okay, that I'm doing myself, okay, on my own time with my own energy. So this is part of the price of being an entrepreneur. I don't know if you're a one-man operation, right? But as you know, these are part of the startup costs that you hope for some return on your investment down the road. But it's certainly worth it. My only point, Collins, was that from this training, from this session, at least you appreciate the value of creating this kind of content, right? So then if you need to eat it yourself and do it yourself, it's going to suck at the moment, but then down the road, you'll appreciate, good, I have this foundational content. Okay, that's what we're talking about today, too, is that we're pouring the concrete of the foundation of your brand. And then brick by brick, you're building upward in terms of your strategic communications content. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Udochi, anything else?
Nothing else, no, but I guess we can close now. I think we've gotten through everyone. So just want to thank you again so much, Michael, for coming on to this session and sharing with us. I hope that people will be able to follow up with you as they have more questions or need more of your services. So please, if you can, if you feel comfortable, if you want to put your contact information in the
Yeah, it's
chat.
actually here.
Okay,
I
so
don't know
you're
if you can
sharing
all
it.
if
Okay,
you can all see this.
okay.
Feel free to reach out. Absolutely.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And then also we'll look to see if we can, within from BAF, organize a group follow-up group workshop to help us
Yes.
with what we've kind of shared this afternoon or this evening.
Yeah.
For so thank you so much again, Michael, and thank you to each of you guys for being here. Thank you, Siamanda. Siamanda was one of our speakers recently, so thank you for joining again today. So with that, I'm gonna say take care to everyone. But before I do that, let me just share also Baf's information in case you're not following us on social. You don't know our website, please feel free to engage with us there. You can send us messages. And as Michael also shared earlier, we have everybody's emails. So we'll share the recording from this session with you so that you can go back and rewatch it as often as you need to get more information and get more insights from it. So thank you so much again,
Excellent.
and we wish you the best and hope to see you at our future and upcoming sessions.
Right on.
Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. Nice meeting you all. Enjoy the
Yes.
rest of your day. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure. You're welcome.